Hello and welcome to the Financial Puzzle Playbook with your host, Jim Sumpter. I'm RJ Malik, producer of this podcast. So, Jim, welcome. Hope you're doing well. You look good.
I appreciate that, RJ. I'm doing well. Doing
Oh,
well.
great.
We're approaching the weekend, so that's always a good thing.
It's always a good thing. On our
That's right.
last podcast, you touched on the 6 puzzle pieces. So on this podcast, let's review the 6 puzzle pieces first, and then we'll talk about CMC Financial. How's that sound?
That sounds great. So, we talk about puzzle pieces all the time, and we're going to get into the branding of our logo and things like that and the puzzle. But, I tell people everything starts with cash flow. That is one of the biggest puzzle pieces. So what comes in and what goes out and everything that happens in the middle. So cash flow, retirement, how we invest money, what are the tax implications of that money? Are there any insurance implications on anything? That's a very, very big puzzle piece that a lot of times we don't like to talk about, but we really need to dive into, and we will in future episodes. And then passing assets to the next generation, the estate. What are the implications from an estate standpoint? So those are the big pieces: cash flow, investment, tax, estate, retirement, and insurance. That's what we're going to address.
Okay, very good. So are you going to go over the individual pieces again, or how do you want to approach this?
Yeah. So I think what we want to do on this podcast in general is every podcast that we do, we're going to talk about what puzzle piece does this topic fit into.
Okay.
And what we're going to find out is that sometimes it's just one piece. Sometimes a topic may hit multiple pieces,
Right.
and we'll address that in the beginning. We'll address that as we move through. And that's what I want our listeners to remember is, everything that we do is going to be very intentional, and it's going to fit into one of those puzzle pieces, which is sort of a backbone of CMC Financial. So as we get into CMC and what we do and what we're all about, think about it in that respect.
So the puzzle pieces, one piece may tie in with another, or it may tie into 2 or 3 pieces at the same time. Is that how it works? I mean,
Exactly. So let's think about it this way. So if you're making an investment decision, we have to look at not only how does that investment decision affect today, how does it affect your income tax? Does it affect your income tax today, or does it affect your income tax in the future, or is it both? Or if we're making an insurance decision, how does that affect you today? How does, from a cash flow standpoint, in other words, what's the cost? And then are there tax implications today? And then how does that affect future generations if it transfers? So that's estate. So those are just some real simple examples of how different puzzle pieces work and intertwine.
so you must be heavily invested in a crystal ball so you can see the future.
I don't know that our crystal ball is any better than anyone else's crystal ball, but as a planner, you bring up a good point, because as a planner, we have to look at what are the rules in today's world.
Right.
How do those affect today's world? And I'll give you a real simple example. I know we're kind of jumping ahead, but this is a good example of how this affects cash flow.
Right.
So for the past several years, if we've gone to the bank and invested in a CD, we may get, 0.25%, 0.5%.
Right.
It didn't affect us very much from a cash flow because we weren't making very much money.
Mhm.
It didn't really have a big tax implication because we weren't being taxed on a lot of money. But when interest rates started going up a year and a half ago, all of a sudden those CD rates, if you drive down the road and your local bank has this big banner, come invest 5.25, 5.15, 8-month CD, 5 point, whatever. Well, that's a change and that's an impact. So from a planning standpoint, whereas, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we may not have really suggested using a CD strategy or for your cash reserves, whereas today we might. So that's what I'm talking about. Things are constantly changing. So as a planner, we have to look at not a crystal ball, but we have to say, okay, what is happening today in
Right.
today's world with this particular client, with their set of circumstances, with their goals and objectives. That's how we start, and we start kind of developing that financial plan.
So you're constantly reviewing each plan
100%. I tell
because
people, yeah, this is not something that's a one-time exercise that we create a nice big book that we put on the shelf and say, wow, that
right,
was fun.
right,
This is an ongoing process that we do review. Now, do we look at it every single day?
right.
No, because
No.
it'll drive you nuts. Um,
Yes.
but we do review ongoing, and that is certainly a part of our whole planning process.
And then you got to be ready to pivot
Absolutely.
if things are
Absolutely.
going on in the economy, things are just going on in general.
Yeah.
So you have a plan, but then you have a plan to pivot
Right.
if need be. So you sort of have multiple plans ready to go. I guess that's where the six puzzle pieces come in.
Yeah. It's interesting because every decision that we make when we make a recommendation, or when the client is going through their due diligence process on, do I want to do this? Do I not want to do this? Every decision we make is I'll call it multi-layered. And
Hmm.
and we have to look at, okay, this may be the best decision in this scenario, but
Right,
what about in that scenario? Or what
right.
if this happens versus what if that happens? How
Okay,
does that affect each of the different pieces? So I tell everybody, we start out, everything falls into one of these six big broad umbrellas. But
right.
then the big broad puzzle pieces could have 10 parts to it. and
Okay,
and so we look at all the different parts, we put it all together, we say, yep, that's exactly the greatest plan for us right now. And I talked about this in our last episode. The story I always like to tell is, we've created this financial plan, we've got our puzzle together, we're sitting down at the Thanksgiving table, and it's all good, and we're eating and we're drinking and we're happy and everything's good. We've got our plan, and then here comes the dog running through the kitchen, hits the table, and a fourth of our puzzle falls off, through no fault of our own. But that's
right.
inflation, that's a job change, that's a death that's unexpected, a divorce that's unexpected, a marriage, a child being born, something happens in the economy, an unexpected move, things totally beyond your control that affect your financial plan. So, you talked about pivoting. Well, then we have to pivot. So we pick our pieces back up, and sometimes they go back in the same order and sometimes they don't. And if they don't, we have to make the adjustments or pivot, as you said,
Hmm.
and then create the new plan or the updated plan. And so we're constantly looking at all of those things, and making updates. And so as we delve into the real meat of the podcast and in other episodes, we're going to get into a lot of those what ifs.
Right.
We're going to get into what are the things that could affect your cash flow, what could affect your insurance decisions, what could, you everybody gets company benefits at their job. Well, all of a sudden the benefits package changes. Well, how does that affect each of the different areas? So we're going to get into that, as we sort of go throughout the process. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So
It sort of reminds me. I think it was Mike Tyson, who the former boxing champ, who said, "You go into a match with a plan, but the plan changes after you get hit in the face the first time."
that's right. That's
And
right.
I was thinking about that as you were talking about how the adjustments you have to make. Now it's not that drastic, obviously, but there's a lot of similarities where you're planning, but you also have to plan, and it's almost impossible to plan for the unexpected or be ready. Maybe it's not planning for the unexpected, but be ready to
Right.
adjust.
Well, RJ, I'm going to give you a real good story in a minute, as we start talking about who is CMC, what is
Right.
CMC about, where in the world did we come up with the name? things like that. And it's going to address the unexpected.
Okay.
And it's something that happened personally to me in my life that I think made me a better planner and made me realize that yes, sometimes life hits you and you have to pivot
Okay.
and you have to make adjustments. So we'll get into that in just a little bit. So
Okay. Well, is there any more that you want to talk about with the six puzzle pieces and reviewing
not
it, or?
yeah, not at this point. It's just I want the listeners to remember that every episode we do is going
Mhm.
to fall into one or multiple of those big pieces, and that's what I would encourage everyone to do in the beginning is say, okay, where does this fit in
Sure.
the puzzle pieces, and more importantly, where does this fit in my situation?
Okay.
Where does this fit in my family? Where does
Okay.
this fit in my group of friends that I know? And so that's what we'll address as we go on. Let's talk a minute about, I get asked all the time, who is CMC?
I was
And
just about to ask that question.
yeah, so CMC Financial was started by me in December of 2015 when I moved from my previous firm to RFG Advisory, and I became an independent advisor, which meant that my world and the way that I could help clients was just opened up and exploded because I'm now independent, and so I needed a funding mechanism for basically compensation, and so I created an LLC. Okay, and filed with the Secretary of State, and CMC was founded. So when you're looking at, okay, what name do I use? You run through 1,001 options. It's kind of like when you have your first child and you go through the 1,001 baby names book. It's kind of the same thing when you're creating a company. And speaking of baby names, CMC stands for my kids. It's
Okay.
Carson, Madison, and Cassidy. So I tell everybody as I'm telling stories, because I will tell you, and I'll go ahead and tell the listeners, there will be plenty of stories about my kids. They're sort of my world and that I live in. But my thought process was, my kids get all my money anyway. I might as well name the company after them. And so they're founded CMC Financial. And
Nice.
so that's what it means for us: Carson, Madison, and Cassidy.
Did you share
Um,
with them that's the reason why
oh,
you?
100%. And they, and
Okay.
they, and they 100% agreed. They were like, yeah, that's about right. So
Okay.
I have told them that, look, I've done a lot for you. I need you to pick me out a really nice home at some point, and I have some criteria, which we'll get in a future episode.
Nice.
But yes, we have had that discussion.
That's nice. That's great. All right. So you have the name, and what is the next step with
Yeah.
CMC
So
Financial?
so it was interesting. So for the first several years of being an independent advisor, I was Jim Sumpter, RFG advisory, wealth manager, CFP, financial planner, the whole yard. But I didn't really use CMC in a public forum. Well, about a year and a half ago, I decided to rebrand the firm. And so now everything that we do is under the name of CMC Financial. I haven't changed. My seat hasn't changed. I'm still affiliated with RFG Advisory, but so are 100+ other advisors. So, in order to separate our firm, we determined that it would be best to rebrand. So we rebranded. We went through this process. The name was the name. The name was not changing. Couldn't change my kid's name, so might as well keep that. And so CMC, as a branded entity, was born. We had to then go create a logo. And if you see our logo, it's not your normal financial services logo. First of all, it has a puzzle piece, which we've talked a lot about the puzzle, and everyone
Right.
knows kind of that story of why that's there.
Sure.
But there's four corners to the puzzle that are different colors. Those are the kids' favorite colors. So
Oh, okay.
Carson's is green, Madison's is teal/green. We made it teal in this case. And then on the right hand side, there's this little color of pink. And so when I went to Cassidy and I said, and now Cassidy is my Barbie child. Okay. She is 100% Barbie, everything, pink, everything. That is her favorite color. It has been known since the day she was born. Pink is her favorite color. Okay. So I go to her and I said, Cassidy, here's what I'm doing. I'm creating this financial services logo and I need to know your favorite color. And she goes, well, it's pink. And I'm like, yeah. So what else you got? You know? And, and so, and she just kind of looks at me and I said, sweetheart, I can't use pink on a financial services logo. And RJ, she looked at me and she goes, why not?
Oh, there you go.
I didn't have a great answer. And so we have pink on our logo.
Okay.
And I thought to myself, and I talk about this a lot because so at our firm, we also have a separated out area called Strong Her Money, which is a program designed to empower women to be financially fearless. I
Okay.
work with a lot of females in my practice. I work with a lot of widows. I work with a lot of young females. I work with, that's one of the areas that we kind of focus and work with because working with females is a little bit different than males. Now that's not an exclusive thing. It's just that we do work with a lot of females through our Strong Her Money program.
Right.
So that little bit of pink also separates us. So it's interesting. We have a wall at RFG in our corporate office of all the different branded firms and that are RFG advisors. And I will tell you, and I don't know the number. Let's say there's 40 or 50 of them on there, and our logo stands out to me one of the best because we're the only one that has pink on it,
Yes.
and we're the only one that really has teal.
Not
But you know,
surprised.
we're not your dad's stockbroker. We're not your dad's financial planning firm. We're a little bit different, in what we do and the way we do it and the way we will pivot. And we're extremely comprehensive in everything we do, but everything starts with cash flow. We don't
That
start with, well, what's your investment portfolio look like at your current firm? That's not where we start. We start with what's coming in and what's going out.
that's
Because
the
because
that's
it
the
because if you
foundation.
yeah, if you don't start there, all the other pieces really don't matter until
Interesting.
you know what's coming in and what's going out, and then how do you invest and how do you make it work and everything like that. So that's sort of the cornerstone of what we do.
Hmm.
So CMC Financial, Carson, Madison, Cassidy, the puzzle piece is obvious, and then the color scheme. Then there is a color of yellow on there. Now this is where with working with the marketing people, my favorite color is red. Okay.
Okay.
And I said, well, I want red. And marketing said, no, Jim, you can't use red because it's an implication of, maybe not the best of times and the best of markets and stuff like that. I said, okay, well, we'll go with yellow. So,
Right.
so our four colors are green, teal, pink, and yellow. I think our logo is pretty cool. It's the puzzle piece.
I saw that.
It,
Yeah.
it separates itself out. And so
It,
that's who CMC is from a branding standpoint. Um, and that's who we are and what we do and why we are named what we're named. So
it stands out, and it also says to me that you're not afraid to be a little bit different because
I'm
when you're
not.
talking about branding and things like that, having worked in radio and been in radio management and dealt with branding radio stations, the color schemes you talked about, that would never have gone over with the
Yeah.
radio stations that I worked at.
Yeah.
They wanted, and if I'm thinking back, most of my radio stations that I was a program director at had a black background with
Yeah.
red, they would be red letters.
Mhm.
Or lighter color letters, but never really anything too, um, I guess, out of the norm, I guess
Right.
is the best way to
Right.
put it. Uh, all the colors you just picked out would never have gone over with the radio consultants.
Well,
So,
it's interesting. I started my career early on with another firm, but then I was at Merrill Lynch pretty quick into my career. That would have
mhm.
never worked at Merrill Lynch.
I'm
That
sure.
it was at that point in time it was button down shirt, tie,
Right,
cufflinks, suit
right.
coat. Dark paneled walls. Dark furniture. You know, you didn't have a whole lot of color. But, you know, you bring about a good point because, you know, there's a lot of financial advisors out there.
Hmm.
And one of the first questions I always ask people when they first walk into my office is, what is your experience working with a financial planner? You know,
Right.
and you get a myriad of answers. I mean, everything from, well, we've never really worked with anyone,
Right.
to they have a laundry list, you know. And so I am a CFP. I'm a certified financial planner. I do have a master's in taxation. I have a concentration in estate and tax planning. That is a big part of what we do. And so, you know, I was talking to a client. It's actually a new client. Just recently, new within the last quarter, and you know, they're pretty high income. And so in their particular situation, municipal bonds were appropriate. And, you know, that's not always the case, but in their particular situation, they were, because they had so much taxable income. And so I'm looking at their investment portfolio. Now, we all started with, again, we started with cash flow, what's coming in, what's coming out. They had a lot of discretionary income. And their question was, well, what do we do with it? Do we add more to our retirement plan? Their kids have recently graduated college, so they didn't need to do education planning. They had some other retirement um, goals as far as real estate and property and things like that. But one of the things that really stepped out, because they were in a very high tax bracket last year, and I helped them with all their tax work, is they were paying a lot of money on dividends and interest. And so I'm like, why do you own these? And really kind of expecting to have an answer. They were like, well, I don't really know. That's what the investment advisor put us in.
I
I was
understand that.
like, okay, so let's have a conversation about that. I said, would it be okay with you, of instead of paying, I'm making this up, but let's say instead of paying 40,000 a year, you know, having 40,000 of income, we had zero of income, but you had a very similar return. And they said, well, how in the world do you do that? And I said,
Right.
well, in your particular situation, municipal bonds are appropriate. And again, that's not always the case. You have to work with, you know, your tax person and your planner to make sure that that would or would not be appropriate. But in their case, it was. So if you think about that one story, that hit cash flow, it hit retirement planning, it hit taxes, and then we also delved into that account about how do we pass that on to their estate, you know, to their
Mm.
kids. And then we had these what ifs of, what if one of them passes away, then what does that look like? So now here comes insurance. So everything that we do with one little recommendation could affect so many different areas. Well, I think that makes us a little bit different. And so if our logo is a little bit different than somebody else's logo, well, maybe that's why, you know, and being able to pivot and make changes and make adjustments, and it's an ongoing process. And that's what's going to be fun about this podcast, is really getting into a lot of the details, and how we kind of come about and approach things maybe from a little different perspective. Because the other thing that I think advisors are really good at is making things way too complicated.
Mm.
And sometimes if we keep it simple, and we start with cash flow, then we look at the different goals and your objectives, and we start really kind of breaking it down. It's really not complicated, but I think a lot of times advisors try to make it so complicated. You know, we come up with this 90-page book and all these charts and all these graphs and all this historical data, and you know, that's important, but that's my job to look at. That's not my job to show you everything that I know. You know, my
It's e-
job is to make it simple.
well, it's easy though to get caught up in a lot of things as
Yeah.
you're moving on or moving along and trying to plan things, and you want to justify,
Mm-hmm.
why am I doing this move? Why am I suggesting this?
Yeah.
And to do that, you bring up all this information.
Yeah.
But I love keeping it simple. I relate to it because, as a former radio program director, when running radio stations, I employed the KISS method: keep it simple,
Keep
stupid.
it simple, stupid. That's right.
and it worked for us. And the other thing I like listening to you, I relate because you do things that you think are right.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many times when I would, be at different radio stations, we were on the defensive.
Yeah.
And when I got into a management position, I never played defense. Always went, I wanted people to react to what I was doing.
Right.
And, you know, and it seems like you do play obviously defense is a big part of what you do, but you don't say, well, everyone else is doing this, so I'm going to do this. You look at the individual person and say, okay, this is their life. This is what they need. This is strengths, weaknesses, all that stuff. You take a case by case basis. Am I surmising that correctly?
No, I think that's 100% correct. I tell everyone, nobody is a cookie cutter where we fit everybody into a box. As an independent advisor, I do have a myriad of resources that are available, and not everything that we offer or can do is appropriate in every situation. I will tell you, and I think this is real important, is we are a fiduciary, and and we do have an obligation to put the client's interest first ahead of our own. And I think that's really important, and kind of one of those questions. We'll get into a future podcast about questions that you should ask a potential advisor. That's one of them. Are you a fiduciary? Because if they're not, then you have to question why not. And that's one of the things that's really important to us. So not everybody fits into a box. Now, that also doesn't mean that every single financial plan and every single recommendation is different than everyone else. We have some investment models, and we have structure, and we have processes, and you may fit into the process, but your very specific recommendation is going to be very specific to yourself, and that's where that ongoing monitoring and everything like that takes place. It's kind of like, and I'll kind of wrap up with, a brief synopsis on each of the kids, because it's Carson, Madison, and Cassidy. So, and this will be a much more in-depth process when we talk about Carson. But I talked a few minutes ago about the unexpected. Um, no one ever wants to be sitting in a room and have someone tell you your child has cancer.
Mm.
But that's what happened in our situation with Carson when he was 16 years old, and that was in 2010.
Wow.
And, Carson lived about 11 and a half months battling cancer. We'll get
Mm.
into that a lot more,
Okay.
but I thought we would at least broach the subject today.
Sure.
So he's the
Sure.
C. Okay. The M is Madison. Now Madison's mom and I got married when she was 14. So technically she's my stepdaughter.
Okay.
According to my checkbook, she's just like any one of my other kids. But Madison is about to graduate from medical school. In
Nice.
fact, by the time this episode drops, she is going to be within 3 days, one way or the other, of graduating from medical school, and she's about to start an emergency medicine residency
Wow. That's
in
awesome.
in Illinois.
That's
So
awesome.
we're about to embark on that. And I'll touch on that. There's a cost to that. There's a cost to moving. She's about to go from, I'm 27 years old. I haven't had a job because I've been in school since I was 5, to all of a sudden I have my first new job. I'm filling out the W-4s, the benefits paperwork. What does all of this mean? And we're going to get into that. So her financial plan and her situation is going to be all about cash flow for the next few months. She's buying a house. She's going through a mortgage process. She's learning about insurance. She's learning about insurance deductibles. She's learning about property taxes. She's learning about a lot of these things that as a young adult getting into the world, that's a lot of what this podcast is going to be about. is talking about those sorts of things. So we'll talk about her a good bit. Then we've got Cassidy. Okay, now Cassidy as that's my pink, my Barbie. You know, she's 5'0", blonde hair, blue eyes. You know, she is exactly what you would expect a sorority girl at a Southern university would be. That is Cassidy. Cassidy has a tremendous bubbly personality. When I was talking to Cassidy about her allowance, I said, would you prefer that I give you some money every Monday or every month? And once a month. And she goes, oh, I need it every Monday. And I said, why do you need it every Monday? She said, because if you give it to me at the beginning of the month, by the time I get around to week 2 or 3, I'm going to be out and I'm going to be asking you for more. So I need it every week because that's going to help me budget. So she's
honest.
going through that whole process. Again, cash flow to her as a 19, almost 20-year-old girl, what's coming in, what's going out. Now, the one thing we have to work with Cassidy is that you can't have more going out than you have coming in. You know, and so we're going to have that conversation a little bit more, but she's a wonderful child. She's in nursing school, and so, you know, I love all my kids. They're all 3 so different. Their personalities are so different. They all bring different things and different aspects to the table. They'll probably kill me, but you know, I can do this because it's my podcast and they're going to have stories told about them. And so, you know, I hope they listen and then don't stop listening and then tell all their friends but you know, every once in a while we're going to bring in a Carson, Madison, or Cassidy story. So
that's awesome.
So that's the kids. That's my world. You know, that's the name, the logo, the branding, the everything, the puzzle pieces. RJ, that's what we're all about. We
Excellent.
Start out, we have a great plan, we pivot, you know, that's who we are. That's what we do. We love all of our clients. We work with, you know, multiple generations of clients, and it's a lot of fun. And I think I'm gonna have a lot of fun, you know, doing this show with you as we move on. So,
well, I can tell you, I'm enjoying my time, and this is only our second podcast. This is it's always enjoyable to talk to you. We are running out of time. Speaking of time, so how can people contact you, Jim?
Yeah, so you know, my direct number is 205-510-9074. Our website, which has all of our contact information, is www.cmcfp.com. So cmcfinancialpuzzle.com. We're on LinkedIn. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook at CMC Financial. And then we're going to start dropping these shows as well as some other things that we're doing in our firm on YouTube. So there will be the YouTube option to come. So
excellent. Thanks, Jim. And most importantly, thank you for listening to the Financial Puzzle Playbook podcast. We ask you to share this podcast, rate it, and leave a review because this actually helps others find the show. Again, thank you for listening. And for everyone at Financial Puzzle Playbook, I'm RJ Malik, and we'll see you at the next podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Financial Puzzle Playbook. Click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. Don't forget to follow us on social media by checking the links in the description. And contact us today by visiting our website at www.cmcfp.com or give us a call at 205-510-9074. Content here is for illustrative purposes and general information only. It is not legal, tax, or individualized financial advice, nor is it a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any specific security, or engage in any specific trading strategy. Results will vary. Past performance is no indication of future results or success. Market conditions change continuously. This commentary reflects the personal opinions, viewpoints, and analyses of CMC Financial. It does not necessarily represent those of RFG Advisory, Private Client Services, their clients, or their employees. This commentary should not be regarded as a description of advisory services provided by CMC Financial or RFG Advisory, or performance returns of any client. The views reflected in the commentary are subject to change at any time without notice. Securities offered by registered representatives of Private Client Services, member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services offered by investment advisory representatives of RFG Advisory, a registered investment advisor. Private Client Services, CMC Financial, and RFG Advisory are unaffiliated entities. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where RFG Advisory and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advisory services may be rendered by RFG Advisory unless a client agreement is in place.